It was a foggy afternoon in the small town of Dustville. The air felt thick, like a big, wet blanket hanging over everything. You couldn't see far because the fog hid the trees and houses, making the world feel small and quiet. In the middle of this gray, misty day, there was a man named Tom Grayson. He was all alone in the old cemetery, pushing his shovel into the soft, brown dirt. The cemetery was full of old tombstones, some cracked and leaning over like they might fall any second. Tom worked hard, digging holes for graves, one after another. His shirt stuck to his back from sweat, and little drops rolled down his forehead. Most people in Dustville didn't pay much attention to him. To them, he was just the graveyard guy, the one who dug holes and kept things tidy. Nothing special, right? But here's the thing, Tom wasn't what he seemed. Nope, not even close. Everyone thought he was just a regular worker, someone boring who liked being alone with the quiet graves. But Tom had a secret. A big, wild secret that nobody in Dustville knew about. His life wasn't always about shovels and dirt. He had a past, a dark one, full of danger and excitement. Something so crazy that if people found out, their jaws would drop to the ground. Before I tell you more about that, let me ask you something fun. Have you ever met someone who looked totally normal but turned out to be super amazing? Maybe a teacher who secretly raced cars, or a neighbor who used to be a spy. Drop your answer in the comments below, I'd love to hear your stories. Oh, and while you're there, tell me where you're watching from today. Are you in a big city or a little town like Dustville? Hit that subscribe button if you love stories with big twists, because this one's going to get wild. Tom kept his head down as he worked. He didn't talk much, and he didn't smile much either. His hands were strong, and he moved the shovel like it weighed nothing. The tombstones around him were old and spooky, with names and dates carved into them. Some were so faded you could barely read them. The fog made everything look blurry, like a dream. If you saw Tom standing there, you'd think he was just part of the cemetery, like he belonged with the shadows and the silence. He wore an old gray jacket and muddy boots, and his hair was messy from the wind. People walked by the cemetery sometimes, but they never stopped to say hi. They'd just glance at him and keep going, thinking, oh, that's just Tom, the grave digger. They didn't know there was so much more to him. See, Tom liked it that way. He didn't want people staring at him or asking questions. Being quiet and boring was his trick, it kept his secret safe. If he acted loud or fancy, someone might start wondering about him. And Tom didn't want that. Not yet, anyway. He'd been in Dustville for a few years now, living in a tiny house near the edge of town. It had creaky floors and a leaky roof, but it was home. He didn't have many friends, and that was fine with him. The less people knew, the better. Every day, he'd wake up early, grab his shovel, and head to the cemetery. Dig, 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 that's what he did. But deep down, he was waiting. Waiting for something. Or maybe waiting for nothing. It was hard to tell with Tom. The cemetery wasn't a busy place. Sometimes birds chirped in the trees, or a squirrel ran across the grass. But mostly, it was just Tom and the quiet. The fog made it even quieter that day, like the world was holding its breath. He stuck his shovel into the dirt again, pushing it deep with his foot. The hole he was digging was for someone who'd passed away, a regular job for him. He didn't mind the work. It kept him busy, and it kept his mind off the past. But that past? Oh, it was a doozy. Imagine a life full of fast moves, sneaky plans, and danger around every corner. That was Tom, once upon a time. Not now, though, or so he thought. Dustville was a sleepy little town. Not much happened there. People went to work, came home, and watched TV. Kids rode bikes down the streets, and dogs barked at the mailman. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone except for Tom. He was like a mystery nobody bothered to solve. They saw his dirty clothes and his shovel, and they figured that was all there was to him. Poor old Tom, they'd say sometimes, shaking their heads. All alone out there with the graves. They felt a little sorry for him, but they didn't really care. And Tom was okay with that. He didn't need their pity. He didn't need anything from them. He had his shovel, his secrets, and his quiet life. But secrets don't stay buried forever, do they? Nope. Sooner or later, something or someone was going to dig them up. And in Tom's case, that someone was coming fast, roaring into town with engines loud enough to wake the dead. Trouble was on its way, and Tom's ordinary days were about to get flipped upside down. The fog might have hidden him for now, but it couldn't hide what was coming. Those bikers, the ones who thought they ruled the world, they were about to meet the real Tom Grayson. And trust me, they weren't ready for it. So, what do you think so far? Can you guess what Tom's big secret might be? Drop your ideas in the comments, I'm dying to know what you think. And don't forget to tell me where you're at today. Is it foggy where you are, or bright and sunny? Stick around, because this story's just getting started, and it's going to be a wild ride. The quiet in the cemetery didn't last long that day. All of a sudden, a loud noise cut through the fog. Vroom, vroom. It was the sound of motorcycle engines, big and angry, rumbling like thunder. A gang of bikers rolled right into the cemetery, their tires crunching over the gravel path. They wore shiny black leather jackets that squeaked when they moved, and their faces were full of smirks and mean looks. They called themselves the Iron Vipers, like a bunch of tough snakes ready to bite. These guys loved trouble, they looked for it everywhere they went, and today, they found it in Dustville. Their leader was a huge guy named Rex. He was tall and wide, with a scruffy beard and a loud voice that boomed over the engines. Rex jumped off his bike first, his boots hitting the ground hard. He looked around the cemetery, his eyes landing on Tom, who was still digging his hole. Rex grinned, but it wasn't a nice grin, it was the kind that says, I'm about to make someone miserable. He kicked a little pebble with his boot, sending it flying toward Tom. Hey, gravedigger! Rex yelled, his voice rough and rude. This place is depressing enough without your ugly mug ruining it. The other bikers laughed, loud and wild, like a pack of hyenas. There were 5 of them all together, all big and tough looking, with messy hair and dirty jeans. They hopped off their bikes and started walking around Tom, circling him like sharks in the water. One of them, a skinny guy with a pointy nose, grabbed an empty soda can from his pocket and tossed it right at Tom's feet. It clattered on the ground, rolling into the dirt. Another biker revved his engine super loud vroom, and spun his bike in a circle, leaving black tire marks all over the green grass. They were messing up the cemetery, and they didn't care one bit. Tom didn't say anything. Not a single word. He just kept digging, pushing his shovel into the dirt like nothing was happening. His hands didn't shake, they stayed steady, moving slow and strong. The shovel went in, the dirt came out, over and over. Most people would have yelled back or run away, but not Tom. He stood there, quiet as a mouse, letting the bikers laugh and shout. But if you looked really close, if you squinted through the fog and stared at his face, you'd see something. His eyes. They weren't soft or scared. They were sharp, like a hawk watching its prey. Cold, like ice on a winter day. Those eyes followed every move the bikers made, every step, every laugh. Tom wasn't just digging a hole, he was watching, waiting. Rex didn't notice Tom's eyes. Neither did the other Iron Vipers. They were too busy acting big and tough. Look at this guy, Rex said, pointing at Tom with a fat, grubby finger. Thinks he's too good to talk to us. He kicked another pebble, harder this time, and it bounced off Tom's shovel with a little ping. The bikers laughed again, slapping each other on the back. They thought they were the kings of the world, like nobody could touch them. To them, Tom was just a nobody, a quiet, sweaty guy in a dirty jacket who dug holes for a living. They figured he was weak, easy to pick on. Oh, how wrong they were. They had no idea who they were messing with. The bikers kept going. One of them, a guy with a red bandana, spit on the ground near Tom's boots. What's the matter, gravedigger? Too scared to say hi, he teased, grinning with yellow teeth. Another one picked up a stick and threw it into the hole Tom was digging, just to be annoying. The stick landed in the dirt with a soft thud, and Tom didn't even blink. He reached down, picked it up, and tossed it aside without looking up. That made Rex mad. Hey, he shouted, stepping closer. You ignoring us, huh? Think you're better than the Iron Vipers? His voice was loud, and his face turned red under his beard. Tom still didn't answer. He shoved the shovel into the ground again, pulling up a big pile of dirt. The bikers didn't like that. They wanted him to fight back or run off crying, anything to make their game more fun. But Tom wouldn't play. He kept his mouth shut and his hands busy, like the bikers were just flies buzzing around his head. That made them madder. Rex crossed his arms and stared at Tom, trying to look scary. "You're gonna regret this, buddy," he growled. "Nobody ignores us and gets away with it." The air felt tight now, like something big was about to happen. The fog hung low, wrapping around the tombstones and the bikes. The cemetery wasn't peaceful anymore, it was full of noise and tension, like a storm about to break. The bikers kept circling, kicking dirt and tossing junk, waiting for Tom to crack. But he didn't. He stood tall, his shovel moving steady, his face blank. To anyone watching, it looked like he didn't care. But deep down, something was waking up inside him. Something old, something strong. Those sharp eyes of his. They weren't just watching, they were planning. Rex and his crew didn't see it. They were too full of themselves, too busy laughing and showing off. They thought they were the toughest guys around, the ones who made the rules. In their minds, Tom was nothing, just a weird guy in a graveyard who didn't know how to fight back. They didn't know about his past. They didn't know about the danger hiding behind his quiet face. All they saw was a target, someone to bully for fun. But every shout, every pebble, every rev of their engines was piling up. It was like they were poking a sleeping bear with a stick, not knowing it was about to wake up and roar. The Iron Vipers thought they were in charge that day. They thought they could do whatever they wanted, and nobody would stop them. But Tom? He wasn't scared. He wasn't weak. He was something else, something they'd never expect. And soon, very soon, they were going to find out exactly who they'd picked on. The tension was building, thick as the fog, and the cemetery was about to become a whole lot less quiet. Days went by after that first noisy visit from the bikers, but they didn't leave Tom alone. Nope, not even close. The Iron Vipers kept coming back to the cemetery, like it was their new favorite playground. To them, it was a fun game, mess with the quiet guy, see how much he could take before he got mad or scared. They'd roll in on their loud motorcycles, engines growling, tires kicking up dirt. Every time they showed up, they tried something new to bug Tom. It was like they wanted to break him, to make him yell or run away. But Tom? He didn't budge. Not one bit. One afternoon, the sun was high in the sky, and the fog was gone. The cemetery looked peaceful until the bikers roared in again. Rex, the big leader with the mean grin, was in an extra bad mood that day. He jumped off his bike and stomped over to Tom, who was digging another hole. Without saying a word, Rex grabbed Tom's shovel right out of his hands. The shovel was old and heavy, but Rex tossed it like it was a toy. It flew through the air and landed with a loud thud in a muddy ditch nearby. "Dig that up, loser," Rex said, his voice all snarky and loud. He crossed his arms and smirked, waiting for Tom to get upset. The other bikers howled with laughter, slapping their knees and pointing at Tom. "Yeah, go fetch it, gravedigger," one of them shouted. They thought it was the funniest thing ever, watching Tom stand there with no shovel. The skinny guy with the pointy nose even pretended to dig with an invisible shovel, making goofy faces. The whole gang was cracking up, thinking they'd finally won their little game. But Tom didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even frown. He just turned, walked over to the ditch real slow, and picked up his shovel. Mud dripped off it, but he wiped it clean with his sleeve and went right back to work. Dig, dig, dig like nothing happened. Silent. Calm. Way too calm. That made the bikers stop laughing for a second. They looked at each other, confused. "What's wrong with this guy?" the one with the red bandana muttered. "Doesn't he ever get mad?" They weren't used to this. Usually, people got scared or fought back when the Iron Vipers messed with them. But Tom? He was different. Too different. Rex scratched his beard and stared at Tom, his smirk fading a little. "We'll get him next time," he said, climbing back on his bike. The gang roared off, leaving dust and tire marks behind. They didn't know it yet, but Tom wasn't playing their game, he was playing his own. Then something really weird happened. Late that night, after the sun went down and the moon was up, one of the bikers saw something strange. His name was Jake. He was the skinny one with stringy hair who always hung near the back of the group. Jake was riding his bike alone near the edge of Dustville, where the houses stop and the woods start. It was dark, with only his headlight cutting through the shadows. That's when he saw it, or thought he did. A figure moving fast through the trees. Really fast. Too fast for a regular person. Jake slowed down and squinted. It looked like Tom. Same gray jacket, same messy hair. But how could that be? Tom was just a slow, quiet gravedigger, right? The figure darted between the trees, quick as a cat, then vanished. Jake blinked hard, rubbing his eyes. Nah, couldn't be, he mumbled to himself. Probably just the shadows messing with me. He shook his head, revved his bike, and sped off toward town. Jake didn't tell the others he didn't want them laughing at him for seeing things. But deep down, he couldn't shake it. That speed, that quiet way of moving, it stuck in his brain like a splinter. He told himself it was nothing, just a trick of the dark. Oh, Jake was so wrong. So wrong. Little things like that kept piling up, day after day. The bikers didn't notice, but they were leaving clues behind, clues Tom was picking up. Every time they came to the cemetery, they got louder, meaner, bolder. One day, the guy with the yellow teeth kicked over a small tombstone just to see if Tom would fix it. Tom did, setting it back up without a word. Another time, they threw a whole bag of trash into one of Tom's holes, giggling like kids pulling a prank. Tom cleaned it out, steady and silent. Each mean trick, each loud laugh, it was like they were stacking up pieces of a puzzle. A puzzle they didn't even know they were part of. Tom watched it all. His sharp eyes saw everything, the way Rex always stood with his chest puffed out, the way Jake fidgeted when he got nervous, the way the red bandana guy spit on the ground every 5 minutes. Tom didn't miss a thing. He didn't write it down or tell anyone, he just kept it in his head, like a list. The bikers thought they were winning, pushing him around, making him look small. But every time they laughed, every time they threw something or shouted, they were giving Tom more to work with. He was quiet, sure, but he wasn't weak. He was building something in his mind, something big. The days turned into weeks, and the Iron Vipers got braver. They'd park their bikes right on the grass now, not even caring about the paths. They'd shout louder, throw bigger stuff, make bigger messes. To them, Tom was a joke, a guy who wouldn't fight back, wouldn't talk back. They didn't see the danger creeping closer. They didn't see how Tom's hands tightened on his shovel just a little more each time. They didn't hear how his breathing got slow and steady, like he was getting ready for something. The puzzle pieces were stacking higher and higher, and soon, they'd all fit together. Jake's weird night stayed in his head, but he kept it quiet. The others didn't see anything strange, not yet. They were too busy having fun, too busy thinking they were the toughest guys around. But Tom? He was like a storm waiting to hit. Calm on the outside, wild on the inside. Every mean word, every tossed can, every kick, it was waking something up. Something from his past. Something the bikers weren't ready for. The game was still going, but it wasn't their game anymore. It was Tom's. And he was about to play his next move. The night everything changed came fast. The sky was dark, with no moon to light up Dustville. The air felt heavy, like it knew something big was about to happen. The Iron Vipers rolled into the cemetery again, their motorcycles louder than ever. The engines growled and roared, shaking the ground under the tombstones. This time, they weren't just playing around, they were meaner, angrier, ready to cause real trouble. Rex, their big leader, jumped off his bike first. His boots hit the dirt with a loud thump. He cracked his knuckles, making little popping sounds, and grinned that nasty grin of his. "Time to teach you a lesson, gravedigger," he barked, his voice rough like a dog growling. He stepped closer to Tom, his shadow stretching long in the dim light of their bike headlights. The other bikers tightened their circle around Tom, like a pack of wolves closing in. There was Jake, the skinny one, fidgeting with his hands. The guy with the red bandana spat on the ground, glaring. The one with yellow teeth cracked his neck, ready to jump in. They all thought this was it, time to show Tom who was boss. They'd been picking on him for weeks, and now they wanted to finish their game. Their bikes hummed behind them, headlights making spooky shadows on the tombstones. The cemetery wasn't quiet anymore, it was full of noise and danger. Tom was in the middle of it all, still holding his shovel. He'd been digging, same as always, when they rolled up. But now, he stopped. He set the shovel down real slow, letting it lean against a tombstone. The metal clinked softly against the stone, and then he stood up straight. For the first time ever, he looked Rex right in the eye. Not down at the ground, not off to the side straight into Rex's mean, squinting eyes. "You sure about that?" Tom said. His voice was low, steady, like a whisper that could cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it made the air feel different. The bikers didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything flipped. Rex laughed, a big, ugly laugh that echoed around the graves. "Oh, this guy thinks he's tough now," he said, slapping his knee. He took another step closer, raising his fist like he was about to swing. The other bikers grinned, ready to cheer him on. They thought Tom was finally going to crack, that he'd run or beg or cry. But then whoosh, Tom moved. Fast. Faster than anyone could believe. In a flash, he grabbed Rex's arm, the one coming at him. He twisted it hard behind Rex's back, like twisting a wet towel. Rex yelped, surprised, and before he could pull away, Tom slammed him down to the ground. Boom. Rex hit the dirt face first, his big body making a loud thud. Dust flew up around him, and his tough guy grin was gone. The gang froze. Their mouths dropped open, eyes wide like they'd seen a ghost. They didn't even have time to yell before Tom moved again. Quick as a shadow, he spun around and grabbed the guy with the red bandana. One punch to the stomach, oof, and that biker doubled over, falling to his knees. Then Tom turned to the one with yellow teeth, who was rushing at him with a fist up. Tom ducked, grabbed the guy's legs, and flipped him over like a pancake. Thud. He landed flat on his back, groaning. It all happened so fast, blink, and you'd miss it? Tom moved smooth, precise, like he'd done this a million times before. He wasn't just fighting, he was deadly. The bikers didn't know what hit them. Jake, the skinny one, stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice shaky and high. He looked at Tom like he was seeing a monster, not a gravedigger. The others were too shocked to move. Rex was still on the ground, spitting dirt, and trying to get up. The tough guy masks they'd been wearing all this time cracked wide open. They weren't laughing now. They weren't shouting. They were scared. Tom stood there, calm as ever. He dusted off his hands, wiping the dirt on his old gray jacket. Then he looked at Jake and gave a small smile, not a happy one, but a chilly one that made your skin prickle. "Name's Tom Grayson," he said, his voice low and clear. "Back in the day, they called me the Ghost. Best hitman this side of the country. Retired, until now." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The cemetery went still. No engines, no laughs, no wind, just silence. The bikers stared at Tom, their faces pale in the headlights. A hitman? The Ghost? This quiet guy who dug graves was, that? Rex finally rolled over, coughing and glaring up at Tom. "You're lying," he sputtered, but his voice wobbled. He didn't sound so tough anymore. The others didn't say a word. Jake's hands shook, and the guy with yellow teeth clutched his stomach, still on the ground. They'd heard stories about the Ghost, everyone had. A guy so sneaky, so fast, he could take out anyone and disappear like smoke. A legend from years ago, someone who worked in the shadows, finishing jobs no one else could. But that was just a story, right? Wrong. That legend was standing right in front of them, in muddy boots and a sweaty shirt. Tom didn't move. He didn't need to. The bikers were done. Their circle broke apart, and they backed away, eyes darting like trapped animals. They'd come to teach Tom a lesson, but now they were the ones learning something big. All those weeks of throwing cans, kicking dirt, laughing at him, it was like poking a sleeping tiger. And now the tiger was awake. Tom's sharp eyes scanned them, cold and steady. He didn't yell or chase them. He didn't have to. They knew they'd messed up bad. The air felt different now, thick with shock and fear. The Iron Vipers weren't the big, bad gang they thought they were. Not tonight. Tom Grayson, the quiet gravedigger, had flipped everything upside down in just a few seconds. The secret was out, and it hit them like a truck. They didn't know what to do, didn't know what came next. But one thing was clear, they'd picked the wrong guy to mess with. And they were about to find out what happened when you crossed the Ghost. Rex was still on the ground, his face red and dirty from eating the dirt. He tried to scramble up, pushing with his hands and kicking his legs like a flipped-over turtle. But Tom wasn't done yet. He stepped forward and planted his big, muddy boot right on Rex's chest. Not hard enough to hurt bad, but hard enough to keep him down. Rex froze, looking up with wide eyes. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with," Tom said, his voice low and serious, like a teacher telling you to behave. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. Rex gulped, and the fight went right out of him. The other bikers dropped their tough act fast. Jake, the skinny one, threw his hands up and stammered, "Please, don't hurt us." The guy with the red bandana nodded quick, like a scared puppy. Even the one with yellow teeth, still rubbing his belly, mumbled, "We're sorry, okay." They weren't big and bad anymore, they were just a bunch of guys who'd gotten caught being mean. Tom looked at them, his sharp eyes moving from one to the next. He didn't hit them again or kick them. He'd already shown them enough. "Stay out of my cemetery," he said, pointing at the ground. "Or next time, I won't be so nice." His words were simple, but they hit like a hammer. The bikers nodded fast, too scared to argue. Tom took his boot off Rex's chest and stepped back. Rex rolled over and crawled to his feet, brushing dirt off his jacket. He didn't look at Tom, he just waved at his gang. "Let's go," he muttered, his voice small. The Iron Vipers didn't waste a second. They climbed on their bikes, engines rumbling low, and took off. No loud revving, no shouting, just the sound of them slinking away, tails between their legs like dogs who'd been yelled at. They rode out of the cemetery and out of Dustville, not looking back. Word spread fast in the little town. By morning, everyone was whispering about what happened. "Did you hear about Tom?" people said at the store. "He took down those bikers all by himself." Kids on their bikes stopped to stare at the cemetery, pointing at Tom as he worked. The grown UPS started piecing it together. The quiet guy who dug graves wasn't just some nobody. He was a legend, a real-life tough guy hiding right under their noses. The Ghost, they called him, passing the story around like a secret treasure. Tom went back to his shovel the next day, digging like always. The cemetery was quiet again, just birds and the wind. But it was different now. That quiet worker? He wasn't just digging graves anymore. He'd buried the bikers' pride 6 feet under, deep in the dirt where it belonged. The townsfolk didn't laugh at him now, they watched him with big eyes, full of wonder. Tom didn't say much, but he didn't need to. He'd shown everyone who he really was, and that was enough. "Okay, kids, listen up because this part's important. Tom Grayson's story teaches us something big. You never really know who's standing right in front of you. That's right. The person you see every day, the quiet kid in class, the lady who sweeps the floors, or even the guy digging graves like Tom might be hiding something amazing. You might think they're boring or weak, maybe even laugh at them a little. But guess what? That same person could surprise you big time tomorrow. They could be super strong, super smart, or super brave, and you'd never see it coming. Tom was like that. The bikers thought he was a nobody, but he turned out to be a legend. So here's a fun question for you: have you ever underestimated someone, like thought they couldn't do much and then they proved you totally wrong? Maybe a friend who won a race or a cousin who fixed something tricky. Drop your answer in the comments below, I want to hear your stories. Let's think about this some more. Tom Grayson didn't look special. He wore old clothes, got sweaty, and stayed quiet. The Iron Vipers saw him and thought, "Ha! Easy target." But they were so wrong. Tom wasn't just a gravedigger, he was the Ghost, a hitman who could take down anyone. He didn't brag about it. He didn't show off. He just waited. And when those loudmouth bikers pushed him too far, he flipped everything around. In one night, he turned them from big, tough guys into a quiet little memory. They ran off, scared and embarrassed, and Tom just went back to his shovel like it was no big deal. That's pretty cool, right? Here's the secret: sometimes the strongest people don't need to shout. They don't need to wave their arms or tell everyone how great they are. Nope. They're quiet. They watch. They wait. And when the time's right, like when someone's being mean or unfair, they step up and show you exactly who they are. Tom did that. He didn't fight the bikers every day. He didn't yell back when they threw cans or kicked dirt. He saved his strength for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, bam! He showed them all what he could do. It's like saving your best move in a game until you really need it, then you win big. So what can we learn from Tom? Be careful how you treat people. That kid who's shy might be awesome at something you don't know about yet. That grown-up who seems boring might have wild stories from long ago. You don't know until you give them a chance. And maybe you're like Tom, too. Maybe you've got something special inside you, something strong or brave or cool that nobody's seen yet. You don't have to show it off all the time. You can wait, just like he did, and use it when it matters most. Think about your own life. Have you ever been quiet when someone was mean, then surprised them later with something great? Maybe you practiced hard and beat them at a game, or stayed calm and helped fix a problem they couldn't. That's the Tom Grayson way, strong on the inside, even if nobody notices at first. So don't judge people too quick. And don't be afraid to be the quiet one sometimes. The strongest heroes don't always make noise, they just wait for their moment. That's the end of Tom's story, but it's not the end of what it means. Next time you see someone and think, oh, they're nothing special, stop and wonder. Could they be a secret hero? Could they be waiting to surprise you? And next time someone underestimates you, smile to yourself. Let them think what they want. Then, when the time's right, show them who you really are, just like Tom did. You've got that power inside you, too.